a choice right now, between fear and love. It's just a rock.
Out of the dark night of ignorance and into the shining light of truth.
Expanding reality.
A population of citizens capable of critical thinking.
We don't see things as they are, we see them as we are.
There's a level of reality where everything dissolves into an ocean of energy.
We empower our experience by insisting on our authenticity.
That's very profound. Very.
Expanding reality.
Welcome to Expanding Reality. I am your host, Brandon Thomas. On this episode, we have the great Kathleen Marden. She is one of the most incredible OG UFO authors and researchers in the game. We are also just past her aunt and uncle, Betty and Barney Hill, who were the first, of course, abduction case in the U.S. We just passed their anniversary of 60 years, September 19th of 1961, when that event occurred, and that, of course, spawned off all the high strangeness in her family and her interest in the phenomena in general. Now, she takes the position like we do here on the show. We don't know what it is, but we know that it's not just nuts and bolts. It's ancillary phenomena that is associated with it as well that cannot be ignored. And Kathleen is, like I said, an OG, guys. She's one of the greatest researchers for the phenomena. We are grateful to have her on. So without any further ado, Kathleen Marden. All right, ladies and gentlemen, an incredibly special episode. We have the great and powerful Kathleen Marden on the show with us. Kathleen, how are you today?
I'm doing well, thank you. Nice to be with you.
I cannot tell you this is such an honor. So we're doing this on my birthday. It won't be out, which is September 18th, but we're going to be releasing this a little bit later on, so it will have already passed. But just, I guess, wanted to acknowledge, of course, the 60-year anniversary tomorrow of Betty and Barney Hill's abduction, your aunt and uncle.
Yes, and I want to acknowledge your birthday today. So happy birthday, and my aunt and uncle's 60th anniversary of their UFO encounter and contact experience in New Hampshire's White Mountains.
It's wild. September 19, 1961. I mean, the first reported UFO abduction case in the U.S., which is wild. And of course, you know, whenever I told my wife about you, because God love her, she just hadn't heard of you, and that's okay, right? But I told her, oh my God, it's Kathleen Marden. You know, this is a big deal for me and for my listeners. And so she said, oh, and we put on one of your talks. And I told her, you know, as much as I could about who you were. And she was like, oh, I just thought she was, you know, the niece of this, you know, couple that this happened to, and that she didn't do anything on her own. I was like, no. You are one of the pioneers, one of the most influential researchers in the game. You're a living legend. And we're going to get to some of that because I have some questions for the next generation for you here in a little bit. But if you don't mind, for my audience that just isn't familiar with you yet, do you mind just sharing just a little bit about who you are?
No, not at all. First of all, I'm Kathleen Marden, the niece of Betty and Barney Hill. I did have a professional career. I was a psychiatric social worker, and also then from there I went into education. I was an education services coordinator. But 30 years ago, I left all that behind and began my research and investigation of UFOs, of archival research on the history of government involvement in the investigation of UFOs. I wanted to know what they knew, and also offering support, and also back then, the investigation of ET contact. Today, I've moved way beyond that. I have 5 books, working on a 6th. Also, I'm a hypnosis practitioner. I do the quantum healing hypnosis method as well, developed by Dolores Cannon. And I am co-host of a support group, Awakening Souls. And that is for individuals who have overcome fear and are working toward the expansion of consciousness. So I've moved beyond the nuts and bolts, and it was just a logical progression over all of these years. I've worked on 3 major studies on more than 5,000 experiencers, and I'm a television commentator on a variety of different shows. You name it. I think I have my hands in everything.
Oh yeah, that great and powerful moniker for the introduction is relegated only for the finest, So you got one of those. So I know you are incredible, and your book Captured, of course, co-authored with Stanton Friedman. Groundbreaking. That was fantastic. And your works have been amazing. Here's one here. The Alien Abduction Files, of course, that you wrote with Denise Stoner, and we've had her on the show. So all of this is incredible. Like the way that you've done your research, the approach that you've taken is what we here on the show talk about a lot. We don't plant our flag here. We discuss the ideas, but we have definitely progressed, I think, at least my audience and I, past the nuts and bolts aspect of it. And I mention this a lot. It's the next step for this. And nuts and bolts is where you start. Some people don't ever leave that base, and that's okay. We need that because they really dig in on that research, and they tell us a lot of stuff that we just kind of move past. It's interesting and could be relevant. So I find the different camps interesting, but I'm with you. I research in the direction that you do, with all the ancillary phenomena being completely part of it. So what made you come to that conclusion or lead you to that idea?
Well, for years and years, I was a nuts and bolts researcher. I was an investigator for the Mutual UFO Network, trained by them, and that was what was respected. The other type of phenomena was considered to be woo-woo and not real. And then in 2011, Denise Stoner and I began our first study of experiencers, and we did a study then of 50 experiencers of ET contact, and we had a 25-person control group. We were attempting to identify commonalities that experiencers share that are not commonalities in the general population. And some of the questions on that questionnaire were really revealing, and especially about paranormal phenomena in experiencers' lives. And so I started to explore paranormal phenomena and the overlap. Well, I had some in my own house when I was growing up, but I was off to college by the time it really manifested, after a craft landed across the street within 250 feet of my childhood home. So I had to then remember that, even though I was trying to force myself to just put it in the background, forget about all of this, Kathy. And I couldn't forget about it any longer. And then in 2012, a man who was participating in our study lives in Australia, and he asked me if I wanted to speak with Keek, who was a little ET, that little gray that he was in communication with. And so we had a meeting set up. It was via Skype, and so he introduced me to Keek, and he, as a medium, spoke the words that Keek was saying. And finally, I challenged Keek. I didn't know if this man was legitimate or not because of my mindset back in that time frame. And so I challenged him. I said, I have had chronic fatigue and immune dysfunction syndrome for quite a long time now. And I want to know if you will please heal me, because here I am speaking to the public, speaking at conferences, and I am ill when I return home. And it's really cutting into my style, you might say. And so I didn't anticipate that I would be healed. But 3 nights later, I woke up in incredible pain, just a deep, deep pain. And I woke my husband up and said, I'm in so much pain, I'm afraid we're going to have to call an ambulance. And he said, well, just give it a few minutes and see what happens. Well, what happened is within a few minutes, I found myself in a matrix environment. It was a little bit foggy. I could detect two tall, glowing entities by my head. I don't know if there were more than two. And then I saw, and I don't know how I saw this, but I saw the outline of what I believe was my body lying down, and I could see energy, like movement, passing through the periphery of my body. And then some of the internal organs were highlighted in pink and in mint green. And so that was the last thing I remembered until I woke up the following morning. And when I woke up, I felt like I was 23 again. I have not had a relapse since that date. So I considered that remarkable. And that was evidence to me that it is possible for these entities to communicate with humans telepathically and to heal people as well. So
when was that
really changed my outlook.
Yeah, I would think that it would alter your perception a little bit. I would think so.
Yes.
When was that again?
That was in 2012, I believe.
Do you remember the month?
No, I really don't. It might have been February, but I'm not certain.
That's okay. I was just curious. Did you notice any ancillary phenomena? Because you'd already been researching now for a while. So did you note any UFOs or poltergeist activity around that time?
No, I didn't.
Did you ask for this specifically on a maybe subconscious level internally to yourself even?
No, I just
outside of the alien entity
to heal me. See, it was sort of a test,
yes,
to determine whether or not Keith was real, or if Paul was simply delusional, or maybe hoaxing me.
Right.
You never know. I'd never met him before.
Yeah, and then of course your intent is probably what brought the entities in, and it happens like on an astral level kind of a thing, and then your body can be repaired in that way. So do you think that that's what happened? You were in an astral space looking at your body, watching entities that aren't necessarily visible unless they want to be, and they were working on your...
No, I wasn't above my body looking down. I was in my body. I could see the periphery, and then I could see what seemed to be like a screen over to my right.
Okay.
But I'm not sure if it was really a screen or a holographic image or a vision. I'm not sure what it was. But I was feeling strong electrical tingling through my body. And I said, "Can you stop the pain?" And they said, "It will only be a short time if you can tolerate it, but it's necessary for healing these organs."
God. And then you wake up and of course you're, much, much younger feeling. Was there anything else associated with this? Did it change your husband in any way, or was this extremely physical and local to you specifically?
It was extremely physical and local to me.
Interesting. Because you'll sometimes hear of other things happening, like your husband might have been too close, and then they kind of fix something with him as well because they were there. It's it's part of it, but it's very specific to your energy field specifically, whatever's running this. That's fascinating. Yes. Okay, so you talked about that 1966 landing in your grandparents' place. I love that story. Do you mind walking us down how that even came about?
Yes, I would be happy to tell you. My aunt and uncle, Betty and Barney Hill, had been asked by a team of scientists to attempt to call in a UFO. And they were attempting to observe this and to acquire a piece of hardware and meet with these ETs. So Betty said that she would be willing to do this. And they gave her a script. Every night she would go out onto her back porch and she would attempt to send telepathic messages out to these non-humans. And she discovered that after doing this for about 2 months, she had success. But it took 2 months for each time, for each event to occur. Well, one of those was a request for craft to land on my grandparents' farm. And on this particular night in April of 1966, a craft did come in. One of our neighbors, who was a commercial pilot, observed it coming in for a landing, seemingly. And my grandmother woke up and went to her window and looked out, and there it was landing as well. So we had two witnesses to this event. It left physical trace evidence on the ground that was investigated. And, after that, my family started to have paranormal activity in my childhood home. So in 1966, that was the year I turned 18. And when this activity began, there were light orbs that seemed to have intelligence that were seen. Also, the feeling that something unseen is walking on the bed. And doors would open and close, not just in front of family members, but in front of people who had come to the house for meetings. My father was a Boy Scout leader, and my mother was on the committee. They had committee meetings at my childhood home, and people were amazed. They would hear a baby crying from another room. They would watch a door as it opened. The cat would walk in and then it would close again. Very strange things happening. And then many years later, I was married. I had 2 children, and I was back visiting my mother. And one night I heard my son, who was 4 years old at the time, making a ruckus in the room next to mine. And so I wanted to tell him, time to go to bed. And so I got up, went into the bedroom. I'd left the nightlight on for him. And there he was, chasing one of these light orbs. And both of them were having a wonderful time playing together. And it was darting around, and he was trying to hit it. And I was so startled, I picked him up and ran out of the room with him in my arms, put him into my bed. And that was the end of it for the night. But that was such a surprise. Another time, my husband and I stayed at my mother's house, and we slept in her bed. She went and slept in one of the twin beds. And so it was nighttime. We were asleep when suddenly I woke up because I could feel walking on the bed. And so I felt around. I couldn't feel a cat. And then I had my husband turn on the light on the nightstand, and we both got up. We looked for that darn cat. We couldn't find it. And we went back to bed, and we felt it walking around again. And very strange. And so the next morning, we said to my mother, do you have a ghost cat? And she said, oh, that, I forgot to tell you about that. But then I did, in one of the studies that I worked on, 2 of them were PhD scientists. We had statistical evidence on that. For bed walking, it was 74% of the experiencers had that experience. For light orbs, it was 60%. So quite high among the experiencer population.
You know, what this makes me think of is maybe because of the phenomena of the UFO, it kind of thins a veil in the area. And that's why now you're that area in particular, or maybe even a particular group of entities such as yourself and your family, you know, maybe you guys are now affected by this. Were your parents, because your aunt and uncle's case kind of kicked it off for the high strangeness in your family?
Yes, it did. And my aunt and uncle were having these experiences in their own home as well.
What do you think about the idea that missing time and like the time element to this? That's been very fascinating to me. And I've had a question about this missing time that I'm just going to actually go ahead and tell you, and then I'll get back to what I was going to say. But why do you think missing time exists? Like, let's say, and my reasoning for the question is because I understand the thought of like, if we trank an animal and we take it for observation, or we're helping to repopulate rhinos in the wild or something, that animal is going to experience missing time from its perspective if it's self-aware. But we are self-aware and we do experience missing time. My question about why it happens is, why did they let it happen? It seems that they're either not in control of that part of time, in control of everything else, or because I've heard a lot of the time slip stuff. I know, like Pam Nance, again, we've had her on. She was talking about the abduction case that she went and investigated and got missing time herself. And then they can hear on the audio tape that still was recording out of the only piece of their gear that remained on, and they can hear themselves talking over themselves at the same time. So it's like time's overlaid.
Yes.
Which leads me to the idea that maybe they can manipulate time. So my question about their ability to do things with time is, why do they allow for the fact that some of it can be unaccounted for?
First, I want to say I'm the investigator on Pam Nance's case, and
Yes.
I did the hypnosis. And it was a very interesting case because there does seem to be kind of an overlap of time there. I don't know. I don't have the answer to why there is missing time, why the average length of missing time is 2 hours or so. And, but for some people, they have been returned before they were taken.
Yes.
For some people, there are only, a few minutes of missing time. So I don't understand all of that, but I think that it has something to do with the time-space continuum and moving from one dimension into another through these interdimensional portals that are opened into the homes of experiencers.
Absolutely. It just seems interesting that it exists at all. If you had control over it and you don't let anyone else remember anything else consciously, but the missing time is kind of a smoking gun for the incident. So it's kind of interesting that it's even allowed to happen, which leads me to believe maybe that they want that to be there as kind of a marker, as like, oh, something happened, and kind of pay attention to it because you're being contacted in that way. So maybe it's like a mini memory that they feel that you're capable of stomaching at the time, because maybe it all at once would be just overwhelming. Now you're curious. Now you're like, hang on, I've got 2 hours of missing time. I've got to get to the bottom of this, So now it's like a journey that you're engaged on with intent to figure out this mystery. And at the end of that mystery may lead you to what actually happened, which was an abduction phenomena. It's just interesting to me. Like I said, it's a question I'd never been asked. Like, why the missing time? If they have control over it and they don't want you to remember anything else, why do you think they let you remember the fact that you have unaccounted time? Anyway, so back to what we were talking about the time slips, though, and these interdimensional type portal type incidences that occur. I mean, it's almost like that feeling of the cat walking on the bed is a cat, but it's not from this time. It's from a different time, and the overlays occur to where there was something walking around there, maybe months, maybe years, maybe, decades ago, but it's just not there now. And that impact kind of bleeds over into this time because it's such a area now that's been affected by high strangeness.
And it could be entities that are just outside our own visual range. We have, as humans, have a very limited visual range. We can't see into other dimensions. And many of these entities are fifth dimensional beings. That's what they say.
And that's also a question I've got. So do you trust what the contactees relay to you as far as what the aliens or entities or whatever they are tell them?
Well, I took part in an experiment with a man named Kevin Briggs, and he met some friends of mine at a MUFON conference in 2016 in Orlando, Florida. Now, I was a speaker at the conference, so I was working the entire time. I had a vendor table. And I didn't have the opportunity to meet Kevin. But then my friends asked me if I would have lunch with him. So my two friends and I had lunch with Kevin. And eventually, this happened 2 or 3 times. And then eventually the conversation became so interesting that I invited him back to my house. And we were asking him questions, and all of a sudden it seemed like he was channeling. Now, I didn't recognize this, but my friends did. They were a lot more familiar with this than I was. So then after we learned more and more, he gave us scientific information from the Council of ETs that he speaks with. And so that scientific information was very interesting. It was how to stabilize element 115 and pentium.
Yeah.
And so that was very interesting. He also gave us other information, scientific information that was interesting to me. And then eventually we were invited to take part in an experiment. And this experiment the people would meet once a month at his house, one Saturday per month. And we were each invited to ask questions, and we could take equipment if we wanted to. So we went and we started with our questions. And then at the next meeting, all of these entities, all 8, introduced themselves to us one at a time. When some of them introduced themselves to us, we felt very strong electrical tingling through our bodies. With one of them, it was kind of so powerful that we could almost see parts of this individual. It was translucent. And we could also measure temperature change in the part of the room that those entities were standing in. For the 5th dimensional entities, the temperature went up 6 degrees. But for the 9th dimensional entities, it went up even higher than that. And so that was very interesting. Then we had the opportunity to meet one of them and to learn to communicate telepathically. So I took part in this. They were going to show us craft. And first, my friend Melanie, they don't mind if I use their names. Melanie went first. And the first night that she was supposed to see this craft, she didn't. And it was explained to her that there were a lot of people out in her neighborhood. And she said, yes, there were a lot of people. So they didn't want to show themselves then. But the following night, she did see craft. And so that was her confirmation, her reveal. They had arranged to see her the following night.
Okay, as a consolation, like, hey, our bad, it was too busy.
Yes.
What do you think about the cases, because I'm sure you've heard as well, about the cases where there'll be a group of people, 2 see a UFO and 2 don't, or the rest of them don't. Or you'll see 2 people, one will see it clear as day right there in front of you, can't you see that, and the other one won't. So do you think that that's something that's because of the individual or because of the entities revealing themselves to only a certain number of people?
I suspect that it could be both, but I know that in these experiments that I've taken part in, we had skeptics at the group eventually. We expanded the size of it. The skeptics never saw or felt anything that we did.
Yes.
And so I think that that left brain part of them causes this information not to be accessible. You have to learn to be in your right brain in order to experience this. So you're vibrating at a higher frequency.
The frequency component to this cannot be understated, and that is something that we cover a lot here because I completely agree with you. It's just interesting that, and then though to that point, then that was a question I had. Like, okay, well, if they can show up, then why didn't they just let her see? But through this model, which I think is brilliant, it's very well thought out, is that because there are other people there that are into their right brain that they didn't want to reveal themselves to, that could potentially see them no matter what the entities wanted, because they do exist in a certain frequency around us potentially all the time, and you just have to tune in to be able to see them. And I've heard it explained like they kind of have to dial their frequency down and we have to dial ours way up, and they kind of meet somewhere in the middle, which is fascinating to me. Okay, that's very, very interesting. So what do you think the whole thing is? What do you think it's all about? Nice softball
I
for
don't,
you.
I don't know, because I was never able to determine that these entities were actually extraterrestrials and not interdimensionals who did not come from other planets. I challenged them on that. I said, well, I'm aware of an experiment of this type that was done back in 1954 with a Navy admiral and Wilbert Smith from the Canadian government and other federal government agencies. And these same entities, came through different names, but a council of entities who claimed they were on huge motherships, ships so large that they actually contained motherships, and smaller discs as well. And they gave Admiral Knowles and Wilbert Smith a great deal of information. And the only way that I came across this is that my Aunt Betty told me about knowing Admiral Knowles and about his relationship with Wilbert Smith and the woman named Frances Swan. And so then I went looking for Admiral Knowles' family. I couldn't find anyone, but I was talking on the radio, putting out the message. And finally, his granddaughter came to a conference that I was speaking at, and she brought a thick packet of information, and it included the letters between Wilbert Smith and Admiral Knowles. And it really revealed a tremendous amount of information. So I'm thrilled with that, because the messages are essentially the same as the messages that I received from 2016 on. I mean, this is ongoing. We only meet a couple of times a year now, but I meet with others and meditate every Friday evening. Sometimes I contact counsel, and I always have someone with me as well. And I'm not sure what that's all about, but sometimes when I'm speaking, I have strong tingling in my crown chakra. Sometimes the tingling goes through my entire body. In fact, when I was talking, I just did feel that.
Oh, cool. We're dialed in. I love it. That's amazing.
And it feels good. It feels
really great.
pleasant.
I've had it the whole time. This is wonderful. Yeah. You are an absolute delight. I'm telling you, this is a bucket list moment for me personally. So I was curious about, whenever we look at why do you think that the abduction phenomena exists in the first place? Why do you think that people get taken?
Well, what the general explanation that I know that I've received from ETs on that is that there is a problem with humans, that our technological progress outweighs or is out of sync with our spiritual development. And when this occurs, it can lead to the disintegration of the species and everything on the planet, actually. They've seen this happen before. It's happened on this planet hundreds of thousands of years ago, and they won't let it happen again. So they're attempting to produce a more survivable species that has different characteristics, that they're not, the new human is not as barbaric as the old human.
Good. That's what they talk about the next level of consciousness. Maybe that's what it is. Yes. It's a technological integration with our DNA, with a hybridization program, which is what we hear a lot.
Yes.
Interesting.
So that's their explanation for that. And I think it's highly plausible.
It is plausible, but does it resonate as truthful with you personally?
It does resonate as truthful.
I want to believe that as well. Yeah.
Another reason why they take us is those of us who have lived near nuclear bases and waste dumps, chemical waste dumps, have been taken. They're testing our tissue to determine the level of toxicity in our bodies. And they work to heal us. So that's another positive thing as far as I'm concerned.
Do you think that that's what explains one of the commonalities with abduction phenomena and experience or contactee phenomena, that their parents are somehow connected to the military? Do you think that that's what that is about?
Well, if they had a parent who was on a nuclear base,
Yep.
or if they had a parent who was a scientist who worked on government nuclear projects, it's a high percentage.
Yeah, that
of
would be
individuals, from my estimation, who have contacted me and told me this over the years.
Yeah, that's one of the questions. And of course, a lot of military families live on base where, these things, they're in proximity to these things. So that would make a lot more sense. That's very interesting. See, you wrap up like the big ones, you like connect all these amazing dots. And I've seen your presentations, of course, read a ton of your stuff. And the way that you break down percentages of occurrences within the contactee phenomena. I mean, was a craft involved? This many percent. Was a craft not involved? This many percent. Even down to the entities that are reported. Okay, well, we've got a gray 3 to 4 feet tall. That's reported this amount of percentage of time. And it's fascinating the way that you do this. I think that the way that you're meticulous about the observation, it says a lot, and it's done phenomenal things for the movement.
Well, for me, it's extremely important to have statistical information to rely on. And I worked on the Edgar Mitchell Free Foundation study, and then I spearheaded my second personal study. And I did this through the Mutual UFO Network's Experiencer Resource Team. I was the director of that. It was called Research in that time frame. I did it for 10 years and stepped down this year due to time constraints. But I had 2 PhD scientists who were working with me, social scientists, on that study. And I think it's important when, I don't have a doctorate, although I did study sociology and did research when I was in college. It's been a while since I was in college. But so I felt it was important to have highly credible individuals working on this with PhDs who have done this sort of thing for a living. And so we did. And it's so much more important than just my personal opinion or someone else's personal opinion, because that can be very slanted. And I notice when researchers have not done this kind of study, it is very slanted in one direction, and their level of knowledge appears to be small compared to those of us who have participated in these studies.
Yeah, and even paid attention to it just a little bit more outside of the nuts and bolts thing. I think it's very, very important. It's got to be part of it because it's so prevalent. And I think it might be the biggest key to understanding all of this. So what's the most substantial understanding that you personally have gleaned from the years that you've been doing this, from all the cases?
Well, the most important thing for me is that experiencers, regardless of the type of experience they have, tend to feel trauma after it occurs. And a lot of them just get really weighed down with this trauma. They might have a religious overlay where they feel that they are being contacted by demons and they're stealing their souls and they're going to go to hell, or, these horrible things are happening because they've read some of the early researchers' studies where it said that humans are being treated like lab rats, that these entities never communicate with us, and it's all bad. In fact, they want to supplant us. They're making hybrids who are secretly infiltrating our society and are going to simply exterminate humans. And so it's important that we move beyond that. And that's why really I formed MUFON's Experiencer Resource Team. We started out with 3 people. When I left, we had 50 who were speaking with experiencers in a non-judgmental way, giving support on a day-to-day basis. They also have a list of support groups. They have a list of vetted hypnotherapists and psychotherapists who some do hypnosis, some don't. But some people just have to get past this trauma that they're carrying. And when you do, then you can move on. I teach people who are experiencing this trauma to gain control of themselves so that when this entity comes into their environment, they can project love. And it's really hard because you have that fight or flight response, and then maybe a negative and angry reaction. If you do that, you're going to attract the lower vibrating entities that will attach to you and make your life miserable. But if you can move beyond that fight or flight response, then you can establish a better relationship with the higher level entities, and you can learn from them, and you can make them part of your life if you would like to do that. And if you do, it's very rewarding. It will raise your own vibration, and so you can move toward what they call ascension.
And do you, excuse me, do you think this is like putting toothpaste back in a tube for people that for the small percentage of people that either are repulsed by this, don't get the same feelings, high vibe feelings about it, or they're just not interested? No, we're good. We're just going to go, watch The Real Housewives of whatever and just enjoy our lives. We're not interested in doing this. Do you think that's an option?
I give people an option to do whatever they wish.
I mean, from the entity's perspective, do you think that that's an option for them not to get contacted anymore? Because you don't really hear about people saying, I was really contacted and I didn't really care for it, and then they just stop because I didn't want them to anymore. It seems to continue to happen.
Well, in my book, Extraterrestrial Contact, What to Do When You've Been Abducted, I've written an entire chapter about how to make contact end if you want it to end. So there are a variety of different suggestions that you can use. One of them is as simple as singing the Mickey Mouse song when they come into your environment. So your mind is very, very busy, and they can't gain control of your mind. So that you can do that. Or some people say that you should call out to a higher power, and so that's worked for people who want to make this end. Some people have just asked for a reprieve. Or some people have said, this is really difficult for me because you take me at night when I'm supposed to be sleeping, and then I have difficulty getting up for work the next day. Can you just take me and do what you need to do and not have me wake up? And so that's happened for some people too.
And that was my other question, is if they even decide that they don't want interaction on a conscious level, then it may continue, but they just might not let you remember it at all.
Right. Yes. And then I spoke to one person recently who called on a higher power and said, I'm breaking my contract. If I had a contract with you, I'm breaking it. I don't want this to happen again. And she hasn't had it happen again. Consciously, yeah. That's crazy. Mm-hmm. That's wild. Yeah. And I have heard the higher power thing, mainly Jesus. They say Jesus, and this is what lends to the idea that they're demonic or something, because then you're calling out a specific higher power's name, which is in opposition to something you feel that you need protection against, and it works, which lends, do you think there's anything to that it could be a demonic trickster type element thing that just tells people what they want to hear and makes us feel good, but really it's some sort of prison planet idea? Now, personally, that's a very low vibrational outlook on it. So I'm not a particular fan of that. It actually doesn't resonate with me the way it should. I'm just curious, do you think that they're both options, that you can pick the high vibe one and you can also resonate with the low vibe one because they both exist as options? Well, in my book, I wrote about attracting the lower vibrational entities. The way that happens is if you're in pain, that can happen. If you are depressed, that can happen. If you are addicted to alcohol, if you have more than 2 drinks a day, that can happen. If you're addicted to opioids, that can happen. In fact, in India, they believe that all alcoholics have lower vibrational entity attachments. So all you have to do is raise your vibration by not doing these things. If you are depressed, take an antidepressant to raise the vibration. So if you're in pain, try to do things such as using non-prescription, non-opioid pain relievers, and try to heal yourself. And it's possible to do that. I recommend that you do chakra meditations where you have a silver thread from source that spirals down and enters your body through the top of your head. And it enters your crown chakra and sends healing light into all the cells in that part of your body. And you go through each chakra. And then as you're doing that, you ask to have these chakras cleared. And as you move down through your body, you're going to carry those blockages out finally through your legs and through your feet as excess energy that anyone can use. And then do that. And then I recommend that before people go to bed at night, that you do this meditation and you put a bubble around yourself, a beautiful iridescent bubble, fill it with white light. It's your protection. Nothing can harm you mentally or physically as long as you're in that white light. So I've recommended that to many people. I've done the meditation with people, sometimes at conferences, sometimes through consultations, sometimes in my hypnosis practice. But yeah, I do what I can to help people through this, to help to raise their level of consciousness and spirituality. And people love that. That's where they want to be. They don't want to be bogged down with negative entities.
Right there with you. And the thing about I want to say it was a Vedic translation about the alcohol, and alcohol translates to spirit. That's what spirits, right? And demonic. So that's like taking over you, right? And controlling you in that way. That's just an interesting perspective. Something else that I find so fascinating about this is all the accounts that overlap, but they're described as different things based on the perception of the person or their beliefs or ideologies. So again, back to if a Christian were to get abducted, they would appear to them as demons. They would appear to them as negative entities, or be interpreted that way at least, no matter how they physically appeared, if at all. And then for someone like you, it's a spiritual experience. Other people then find it to be a jinn, or like that we are this prison planet, and then they mirror that. They seem to kind of know what you expect them to look like, or present themselves in a way that's what you expect in a certain way. So what do you think that's all about, the variety of how the phenomena appears and how personal it seems for each individual?
Well, another question that we asked on that questionnaire is, what type of entity did you interact with? And how did you perceive that entity in terms of your emotional relationship with that entity? The highest percentage were a race of grays. Next came the human appearing types. That was just underneath these races of grays. And then from there were the praying mantis types and the reptilian types that were humanoid, not the lizard or the alligator type ones that they call draconian reptilians.
Yeah.
Those are really bad.
Those are the
bad. You don't want to interact with those.
That's right.
So if you want to raise your vibration immediately.
That's right. Post-haste, yeah.
And then beyond that, there were tall whites, tall goldens, light beings, short blues, tall blues, avians, all sorts in lower numbers, small furry creatures.
I want to check those out. Those sound like a lot of fun, like Ewoks or something like that, or Wookiees, right? What is that? Ewoks, that's what it is.
Yes.
So, that's always just been something that's fascinated with me. And then whenever you get to the point that I know Hynek there at the end with Sufos was talking about that it might be a psychosomatic type of a phenomena, that it might be just something that the earth is creating or that we are manifesting co-collectively, or it's there in some spiritual capacity to perhaps guide us or to let us know that there are mysteries still out here. And then the contactee element to that is just kind of more of a confirmation that there's a lot more here that we need to figure out. And it just makes me excited. So doing the research you have done for so long, you've done a phenomenal work as far as setting the foundation for the next generation, which leads me to my next question. What do you think the next generation is going to encounter as far as their research goes?
Well, I'm hoping that the next generation will move beyond the nuts and bolts. I have to say, nuts and bolts is important. So we have to value that as well, because physical evidence is important. It gives us some insight into what is occurring. The star map that my Aunt Betty Hill saw, and it was scientifically investigated, and the discovery was made that it appears that Zeta Reticuli 1 and 2 are the two base stars. And all of those stars have special properties. All the stars on Betty's map are sun-like, although only 5% of the stars in our local galactic neighborhood out 54 light years of sunlight. And all of the sun-like stars in that volume of space are on Betty's map. And also, they're all in a plane, sort of like pepperoni on a pizza, as opposed to raisins spread out through a thick loaf of raisin bread, which means that it's logical and it's easier to travel from one star to the next. So it's a logical pattern. The scientists who vetted Marjorie Fish's work on that star map said that it was accurate, and it's still accurate today.
It's amazing.
So it's remarkable. It leads me to believe that at least some of these entities are interplanetary. There are others who say that they came from a planet, maybe even in a different galaxy, but they just travel on very large craft now. Some say that they have their planet is no longer capable of sustaining life, and so they're living on these huge craft. So it seems logical to me.
Yeah. I mean, why not? I mean, the Dogon tribe, right? I mean, hundreds of years before our ability to detect Sirius B knew about that star. And they said that's
Absolutely.
where the star people come from. They're like, how do you know that? They're like, oh, they told us. It's like, you can't see it. So obviously there's something going on and something to this. Now, I'm a big fan of all the cool phenomena, Hollow Earth. You've got, the variety, right? They're just AI coming from other things. Interdimensional for sure. Had a guy named Paul Askoff on the show, wrote an incredible book, and it's all about the interdimensional phenomena. It blew my mind. But that's one that I really like. And then, of course, the future humans coming back in time machines, Dr. Michael P. Masters, I know Diane Tessman as well. And these theories to me are wonderful. I want them all to be true. I don't think that they're mutually exclusive. I think that things could be coming from other stars. I think that it's interdimensional as well. I think that's also perhaps why we get a variety in craft and of entities as well, is because it's different phenomena, but it's all kind of, playing on the same team in a way. It's just one step out, and it does feel like the next level for us consciously as a society, as a race, right, as a species, to level up would be the way that now we're tuned to be able to perceive these things. And
I agree with you. I don't think it has to be all one thing.
Yeah, right.
Or another. I agree that there's enough evidence in support of every one of those things that you spoke of that leads me to believe that many things are occurring at once.
Absolutely. What's your favorite? Like the one that you're just like, oh, that would be so cool if that's the way it is.
Well, I just love those interdimensionals that Kevin Briggs introduced me to, and who still come back and are in my life from time to time. It makes me feel really good.
Yeah, right.
I do enjoy that. And I know that they're not demonic. I've felt demonic before. I've felt negative entities. They feel entirely different than the positive ones.
This is what's also fascinating about this is just the juxtaposition of experiences and how diverse they are, and how really two people can have the exact same experience but feel completely differently about it. And we see this in witness testimonies for something that crimes that occur. You can't trust it because their interpretation of the memory of it is all that you have to go on, not the actual memory. You just have your interpretation of it, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's fascinating to me that these resonate in different ways. I do think it's an incredibly mysterious part of this experience, and I'm super excited like you. I don't necessarily mind if we never figure it out. I think that we have enough handle on the way it makes us feel that that's okay, which actually leads me to my next question. Do you think disclosure is important?
I think that limited disclosure is important, but I do not think that the human population is ready to meet the extraterrestrials. They're so different than we are. And, the idea that they communicate entirely differently, they don't look like us, they are from another dimension, although they can lower the vibration, I think, using technology so that we can see them. Especially the fundamentalists across the world would have an extraordinarily difficult time with that. And I know I've spoken to a military officer about this, and the idea of telling the population that people are in contact and not all of it is with permission of the experiencer. And you can't tell that to the general population. You can't say this is happening to people and there's nothing we can do about it.
Do you think that we've come any further than with, the Orwell's broadcast where everybody lost their minds? Is that what this is based on? Because I think predictive programming is a very real thing, and I think that the grays and the idea of entities have been put out in our media, movies, all of that for a long time, possibly to prepare us a little bit more culturally, mentally for that idea, something that they didn't really have back in the 30s. But I agree with you that fundamentalists probably would have a problem with it, but this also might explain why the Pope came out and said, guys, it's not necessarily not true that we don't have aliens too. So you can see these religious leaders kind of come out ahead of this and say, guys, it doesn't mean that our God's not the thing and we should still follow the book, but it might be possibly an addition to. I don't know. I'm with you. I've got kind of a mixed bag. I kind of tend to lean a little bit more because I'm a boundless optimist. It's annoying sometimes. And I tend to think that humanity is kind of ready for it, or that at least the results of what the interaction could be, not necessarily your government coming out and saying, hey, aliens are real, just deal with it, but perhaps the interaction and the response and the communication, the contact on a global level. I think that the results of that would yield a much more palatable transition.
Well, I think the CE5 experiments for contact on a global level among those of us who are interested in that and able to incorporate that into our emotional and intellectual lives is very good. We need to do that because we have to raise the consciousness of this planet. We need to raise the vibration through plants, through all of the animals, through humans as well, in order to overcome this COVID problem that we're having worldwide, and so many other things, wars as well.
Yeah, I think we're all just over all of that. I think we're just over it. We're all really ready. And there is some sort of renaissance happening now. There is some sort of awakening that's going on. And this actually was my next question based on what you just said. So I agree with you that I don't think that the fundamentalists and things would have as easy of a transition, but do you think that it's going to take a cultural change of our paradigm collectively that's happening right now? We're seeing hints of it. Do you think that maybe the spiritual awakening stair step, you even look at things like the ayahuasca experience, these are pursued endeavors. So these are things people are seeking out with intent, high raising their vibration. So they're kind of seeking that. And that's why they're able to find it. I mean, you find what you're looking for, right?
You do, but some people find what they're not looking for. I have known people who were attempting to communicate with non-humans, but they knew very little about ETs and ET contact, and they ended up with negative entities as well.
That can definitely happen. That's
I
what's so
say
weird
be
about
careful of what you're asking for. Make sure that when you do this, you do it with someone who is in contact with higher level entities.
This, again, ties so much into like the psychedelic experience. You want a trip sitter. You want somebody to be there with you while you experience this new world or while you're embarking on this new vibe-raising journey, however it plays out for you. There are just so many similarities in the altered state experience or the next level of vibration. I think you really nailed it with this, with the vibratory nature of it. I think that that's one of the biggest, if not the most key component to this, because it is an individual personal experience, which always led to a dead end for me. But now vibrationally speaking, because I'm very tied into the spiritual element of it as well, it makes so much more sense. Thank you.
Yeah. And this is a very important personal message that I'm attempting to carry to humanity and have been working on this for the past few years because it's so incredibly important.
I agree with you on everything except the word trying. I think you were successfully doing it, and then that's the only way that we diverge in that idea. Well, what do you think is the next step for all of this? The next thing that you're excited about and looking forward to?
I am looking forward to having these entities show themselves more on a wider scale so that others who depend upon physical observation will be able to see this and will be able to realize that this is positive. They can communicate, these non-humans can communicate with the humans on the ground as they hover above them telepathically. And I think that's extraordinarily important. And also that people come together, all over the world in these CE5 groups, larger and larger groups, to share information and to disseminate this information as much as possible across all media, not just the UFO or paranormal or spiritual, but across a wide span of media.
Could not agree more. That's why the show's called, I had to tell Stephen Bassett that. I was like, it's not called This Is What Aliens Are. It's called Expanding Reality. We're trying to figure it all out here. We're figuring it all out, right? Kathleen Marden, I cannot tell you what an honor this has been. I'm truly, truly grateful for your time. You're so wonderful and delightful and warm, and I knew you would be, and so this is even better. So thank you. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you so much, and best of luck to you. Thank you for having me on the show. It was a delight.
What a warm wealth of information, insight, knowledge on the UFO phenomena. She is just the OG for a reason, guys. She's been doing it for a long time, but she has the eyes to see all the other ancillary phenomena that have to be included in an educated kind of a further pursuit of what the phenomena is, and I completely agree with that. That's what we talk about here a lot. So all the ways to find her, of course, guys, will be linked in the show notes. Go check out some of her work. Her book, The Alien Abduction Files, with Denise Stoner, and of course we've had Denise on the show. She's wonderful. That's a great read, all these incredible cases. So if you are interested in the UFO phenomena at all, which I know most of my audience is, please go check those show notes. That is some paramount information and a paramount researcher and author that you've got to include in your collection if you don't have it already, which I'll be shocked if you don't. So that being said, the music that you're hearing underneath this, of course, guys, is my good buddy Vinny the Saint. Go check the show notes down there to find Vinny. Go show him a little love. Say hi if you're so inclined. If you like the music that you're hearing and the stuff that we put at the end of the episodes here, that's Vinny's stuff. So go tell him how much you appreciate it and just say hi. Also down in the show notes is going to be the link for the website, so expandingrealitypodcast.com. That's where links to all the socials and everything can be found. YouTube, you can click right on there, go see the video of this and all the other conversations as well. There's a merch link down there also. We have t-shirts now, so go check that out. Great way to support the show. Rock the threads, and we do appreciate it. So go out into your week this week, guys. Just pick up a piece of litter. Of course, be nice to every human, animal, entity, anybody that you come across. Get out of the left-hand lane. Of course, we don't like that. It's a pain in the ass. Nothing lowers your vibe like riding in the left lane, especially in Texas. So if you're going to do it anywhere else. And then buy somebody in line around you a coffee or a meal or a bottle of water, something simple. The reverberation effects and the ripple effects of that one act go further than you could ever imagine. So just try it out. It feels great, and somebody will appreciate it. But beyond all of this, guys, go out into your world this week, and y'all just be good to one another. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next time.